Hey, here I am. 11, no, I'm sorry, 12 minutes late today. My humble and sincere apologies, but I have a real life job outside of this, and that's working for the wonderful Dr. Whimsy Anderson. And I book appointments for her. Part of my job is to speak with clients, answer questions as a trained naturopath doctor's assistant. And I had a lovely, lovely lady who needed to talk for a while. She had some valid questions. Hi, Kathy. Hey, thank you for joining. I was just apologizing for being late. And yes, here is Miss Sasha. Normally, I take this Afghan off the couch, but my cat is sleeping on it right now. And I've learned from past experience, it's best to let sleeping kitties lie, because otherwise she wakes up full of energy, and you've probably seen her darting across back and forth. And a few times where I've had to grab my cat before she jumps up onto the laptop, my keyboard, and disconnect the show. She has come close to doing that a few times, including a few of my shows with Dr. Whimsy on Tuesday. Hey, Ward, thank you for joining. And Kate, thank you for joining. Hey, Wendy, I really appreciate all of you. And I thank you for being patient with me. It was, if you didn't hear me before, it was work related. That's why I'm a few minutes late coming on. I had to finish these phone calls with a client. And Dr. Whimsy and I are very like-minded. We're very much about being of service to people, and she's a wonderful listener. I do my best to be a good listener, and if a person needs to talk, and they need to be reassured about, say, doing an appointment with Whimsy, or they want to know what it entails, then that's my job, and I'm more than happy to talk about it. But anyway, how are you guys doing? Oh, Wendy, I like your heart and your smiley face and your butterfly and your rainbow and your moon. Why am I thinking pink hearts, green clover, yellow moons? Oh, me lucky charms. But I am lucky to have you here. Oh, Ward, you had to put your wash in the dryer. You said, sorry, you're late. No, I'm the one who's late today. This is about as late as I've ever been coming on here, unless I've had Wi-Fi trouble or something. And as usual, I haven't had time to do too much preparation. Doing my work for Dr. Whimsy, but also, I work as a freelance artist. And between that helps pay the bills. Trust me, folks, freelance art does not pay the bills much as I wish it did. Once in a while, I'll get a big assignment that will carry me for a while, but sometimes it will be weeks or months before there is another assignment like that. Like the time I did the paintings for Lucille Ball's childhood home in Celeron, New York. That was a major commission. And I couldn't have been more grateful for that. First of all, for the assignment, the project. As you know, you may have suspected I am a Lucille Ball fan. So I was overjoyed to do that. But it was also a time, let's see, this was about the year 2022. I had lost my job in the pandemic. I was reinventing myself, doing freelance art, which I'd always wanted to do, working for Dr. Whimsy. But my finances did take a big hit, as it happened to a lot of us during the pandemic. And sad to say what's happening right now at the stock market, but we won't go there, hopefully, on this show. That's probably what I will be talking about with Dr. Whimsy on her show, because that show is very much about current events and news. And and Joyce, my dear friend, thank you for joining. I still have that picture to send to you, Joyce. Let me see here. Let me through the comments here, Ward. Got a question about Lucy in London. Is it true that they originally planned to have her do regular travel logs? Uh, you know, I, this was, in the 60s when Lucy was the president of Desi Lou. If you know the background, it was originally her and, of course, her husband, Desi. When they divorced, they still strived to work together professionally, at least in the business end, with Desi remaining on as president. But both of them went through some serious health challenges in the year after the divorce, and I think it was A lot of it was emotional and heartache. But Desi nearly died. Severe diverticulitis. He had to have a temporary colostomy. Had to wear one of the bags, and he was very, very ill. And he said, "Lucy, I can't take it anymore. Will you please buy out my share?" And so she did. And I don't know how Lucy did it, starring on a show and running a studio, because she was not a figurehead. She very much was the president of Desilu. But Desilu, by the point of Lucy in London, I promise there's a point to this. I'm not getting too far off the track, but because Lucy in London, I think, was made around 1966, 65, 66. At that point, Desilu Studios was in a lot of trouble. The only hit show they had was Lucy's own show. And at the time, it was number 2 in the Nielsen ratings. And of course, I Love Lucy was number 1 back in the 50s. But many, many more people in the 1960s had televisions in the 50s. So the Lucy show actually had higher numbers of people than I Love Lucy when it originally aired. So it was like the one commodity the studio had that they could count on. So they were always, and they knew Lucy. Lucy was in the odd position. She was the president of her company, but she was also the most valuable commodity of the company. And she was aware of that. There were many times she wanted to leave the Lucy show. She wanted to quit. She wanted to retire. She wanted to give it up. She couldn't because of the studio. So to get to the point, the Lucy in London thing, yes, it was bandied about, different ways they could capitalize upon Lucy, like doing specials and the idea of travel logs. They even incorporated a little bit of that, like in Here's Lucy later on. Her subsequent series, Nothing as Lavish as London, but they did like a 4-parter where she and her television family, and of course the 2 children happened to be her real life children, as we know, boarded an RV, and they were traveling the West and going to Colorado and West Point Academy and things like that. And I think she always wanted to expand upon that. But Lucy in London was quite an undertaking. It was very expensive to do the special, and of course was done on location. They had huge technical problems making that. Like you must be thinking of that scene where she and Anthony Newley are on the raft, the inflatable raft in the middle of the Thames River. And if any of you who have been to London, like you, Joyce, I know you've been there, you've been everywhere in the world, it will start raining and then it'll stop raining and it'll start and it'll stop and it'll start. So here they are filming. And if you watch that, the way it's edited, it cuts back and forth to where it's raining and where it's not raining. And poor Lucy was trying to protect her hairdo and everything, and it was just getting ruined, and all that London humidity and rain and water, and they're sinking in the Thames. And that might have dissuaded Lucy from doing more projects like that. But it's possible it was on the back burner. I hope that wasn't too long-winded of an answer to your question, Ward. Wendy, will Whimsy be bringing Mila to Israel? No, it's too difficult to do that sort of thing. And, it's a long flight. Truthfully, I would, I know you can put your pets in carriers and put them in the baggage section, but I've heard horror stories of animals dying that way, the carriers getting banged around and stuff, or there not being enough oxygen, or the climate is not controlled. Personally, I wouldn't want to take the risk of it either. I know you can do things like book a seat, another ticket, and take your pet with you that way. And I've heard of people taking their cats on board and putting them in a carrier under their seat, but I think it's like a 13, 14-hour flight. And no, Whimsy will have someone to take care of Mila like she always does. And when Whimsy lived in Los Angeles, it was me. It was me. And I may have told the story too many times. I can't remember if I've told it here. I think it's on Whimsy's show I've told the story, so forgive me. But One time Mila ran away from me. I mean, just darted out the door. And I'm like, no, no, no. Because, I'm sure any of you would agree with me. That's the most horrifying thing in the world to pet set and lose their pet. And so Mila ran away. And I I didn't know what to do. I went outside. I looked for her. I searched. Sometimes I would find her and then she'd see me and dart off again or go up a tree and then finally when I was going to her and I almost had her, she jumped and ran over the fence and went into another neighborhood. And I'm like, no, 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 no. So the only thing I could do, and I had a whole itinerary of plans for that day. I had to stay at Whimsy's place for almost 9 hours and finally, about 10 o'clock at night, here comes Mila. Just walks in the door like nothing ever happened. Mila held me hostage. And, Whimsy is very intuitive, psychic, and she reads Mila's mind. And she said, oh, Mila just didn't want you to go. She loves you. That's how they show their love. So anyway, anyway, no, she won't be taking Mila to Israel with her. And I know Whimsy's going to miss Mila terribly. I've got the same dilemma. And whenever I travel, like I owe somebody a visit, an elderly friend of mine in Laughlin, Nevada. I need to go see him for 2 or 3 days in the next week or two or so. And Sasha, well, here she is. I always feel guilty leaving her, even though I know she's fine. I have neighbors who come and look in on her. And I've always felt it's better, if at all possible, keep the pet in their home environment rather than boarding them at a veterinary hospital or something where they just stick them away in a cage. Because to me, that's probably far more traumatic. And Sasha, the little lady here, she's fiercely independent. One of the most independent, defiant pets I've ever had in my life. I never worry about her. She can take care of herself. But, she has plenty of food, water, her litter box, and I have wonderful neighbors here who come in and that I can trust, who come in and look in on her and spend time. Let's see here. Let me check back the comments here. The Thames was filthy back then. Now it's much cleaner and even has fish for the first time in centuries. I didn't realize that. Though I'm not surprised about the Thames being filthy. I mean, I know that was always a sore point after World War II. After London had to come back after all the decimation of the bombings and all the devastation of World War II. And, it's always been a sore spot about the ugly architecture, all the beautiful things that were destroyed. And because they had to rebuild quickly and economically, a lot of brick and cinder block atrocities came up and a lot of coal burning and stuff. So they weren't so environmentally minded. They had to get their act together. So I can see why now the Thames would be a lot cleaner. If you've ever watched the TV show The Crown, which I love on Netflix, I think it ended last year, season 6. But the part of the story was during the Claire Foy years when she was playing Queen Elizabeth. They did a whole episode about, I think it was around 1952. There was this horrible smog in London. It was from all the coal, burning all the coal and so forth, and something to do with the environment at the time. The weather, there was like a high pressure system or something that trapped all that smog, and all these people were like, their throats were burning and their eyes, and they were choking, and they didn't know how they were going to get rid of all that pollution. Joyce, international travel is a hassle. Lots of red tape. Maybe for a permanent move. Yeah. Oh, if Whimsy ever did make a permanent move, there's no question she would take Mila with her. But yeah, Joyce, I mean, I haven't traveled like you, but I've made a lot of trips to Europe. I haven't done it for a few years, but yeah, there's never been a time it was not a hassle, especially as we all know after 2001. I'd love to go back. I really want to go to Italy again. That was my plan 5 years ago on a big birthday, but there was this little thing called a pandemic, and I ended up spending that big birthday sitting here in my living room, as most of us did at that time. I just spent the day making phone calls and video conferences with a lot of friends and family. Um, Lord, it's gotten a lot trickier in recent months. I'm really sorry to hear that. I know there's some countries now that are requiring visas to enter where they used to not to. I think France is one of them. I don't know. I'd have to look into it. And, you know, like I said, I try to avoid politics and discussing a certain orange man, but you all know what's going on right now. And I'm sure that's making it much more complicated to travel. I'd be interested in talking to any of you who have traveled recently abroad, what it has entailed. When boarding a pet is tragic. Yes, I agree. I agree. That's why I never do it. No, I always have somebody come in and look in on my little Siamese beast here. Yeah, Ward, the killer fog of London. Thousands died. I didn't realize it was thousands. Yeah, I have to confess, I was not even aware of it. I tend to be pretty good on 20th century history, but I was not aware of this until I watched The Crown. Hi, Andy. Thank you for joining. Um, oh, you just got back from the cinema with your families. What'd you go see? Anything good? I haven't been to a movie theater in memory. I'm trying to think when the last time I went to a movie theater. Yeah. Yeah, I think it was last year, and I went to see, oh my God, was it last year or 2 years ago? Uh, I saw the Barbie movie with Whimsy when she was here visiting, and then I saw the last chapter of the Indiana Jones movie, and I don't think I've gone since. And for me, you know what a Hollywood buff I am, how I love movies. I used to be such a purist about this. You have to see it on the big screen. You have to see it with the audience. You have to see it as it was intended. Well, I talked about this recently about how my friend Anastasia came over here and we watched Wicked. Neither one of us had seen it. And it's streaming on the Peacock network right now. And these streaming services, it's all in beautiful 4K, ultra high definition with the fabulous 5.1 surround sound. 4K is what they use in the movie theaters, and I am blessed with a big 65-inch 4K television and sound system. So we just sat here on the couch and we were in agreement. It was just as good of an experience as being in the movie theater. And I never thought I would say that, but technology has finally taken us to a point where it is doable now. Let's see, where's some other comments here. Joyce, when I moved across the country from Washington to Pennsylvania, I chose to not take Simone on the road trip. So you flew back and got her. Yeah. She had to go in her carrier. Oh, I tell you, Joyce, if I ever do find myself in a position where I have to travel with Sasha, I just may talk to you about that, because I've never had to take a pet on a plane before, but you probably heard me say earlier in the show, I've heard some bad things, even though it's done all the time and it seems to be okay. Um, in fact, the woman in San Diego I got Sasha from, who breeds Siamese cats, she told me, she has customers all over the country that she takes the kittens and puts them in a carrier and takes them to the airport and boards them, and they get there just fine. I was lucky with Sasha because I'm in LA, so I was just able to drive down and get her, and meet Diane Kramer in person, a wonderful, wonderful lady who breeds her Siamese cats with integrity. She is very much against the puppy mills, the cat mills, the pet stores. She breeds to make sure her cats are very healthy and strong, and she's very careful about genetics and so forth. Let's see, where's some other things here. Joy. Oh, Joyce, I'm so sorry to hear she was traumatized. Oh, I've heard it's always good to go to your vet and get a sedative. It's usually the best thing if you can just give them something to sleep. that helps them to get through it. But I can only imagine how traumatic it would be. Um, I mean, if I had my way, if I ever had to take Sasha on a plane, it would be to have her in a seat beside me, but that's expensive and that creates problems all to itself. Well, yeah, that Andy, yeah, that is true. The neat thing about cats is they can sleep anywhere or in anything, any size, as you can see. She's here sleeping through the show right now. And as I said earlier, it's best just to not wake her up and get her wound up because she can be like the Tasmanian devil after she's had a nap and she is full of energy. Oh yeah, Andy, you can calming pills, yeah, tranquilizers. You can sedatives. You can get them for dogs and cats at your veterinarian. They can prescribe something, and there's certainly some things. They're natural things. There's a homeopathic product that's wonderful, and I recommend this to human beings. It's called Rescue Remedy from Bach Flower Remedies, BACH, Bach Flower Remedies, Rescue Remedy, and it's like a little tincture bottle with a dropper. And you put about 4 drops under your tongue or in a glass of water, or you can put it in your pet's drinking water. If you're brave enough, you can try to shoot a couple of drops in their mouth, but it's very, very, very safe. It's so safe you can put it in an infant's formula because it's just derived from flower essences and it's homeopathic, but it's really, really good for calming whenever you're under anxiety, stress. And I've even given it to friends who are skeptical. Oh, I don't believe in that stuff. I don't believe in that stuff. I had a friend who was, to put it politely, wigging out because he had lost his job and he had been on unemployment. He was on his last day of unemployment and had not found another job. He was going ballistic. And I said, can I give you some rescue remedy? I am, I believe. I said, whatever, sure. Whatever. So I just put 4 drops in his drink, what I remember what he was drinking. And he was, sipping and talking. And I watched him before my eyes. I don't know if he was aware of this, but over the course of about 10, 15 minutes, he just started to balance out. Keep it in mind for yourself and for your pets. Here I'm doing a commercial, and I didn't even mean to be doing that. Arlene, thank you. Stash, the story behind this. I was actually wanting to either trim it or shave it off altogether today. I haven't had one of these in years, and I have not had much luck in trimming them. And I'm at that point where I'm going to need to do it. So either get rid of it or trim it. And I just was so busy today, hence my being 12 minutes late coming on for this show, that there wasn't time. So here I am once again with it. So thank you. Actually, people tell me they like it. And I don't know. I never saw myself as a mustache person. I think it probably makes me look old. But oh well. Ward, how does it compare to a hot bath and warm milk? Well, you know what? I always say it's whatever is right for the individual person, and there's no reason you can't do rescue remedy and a hot bath and warm milk. Deep breathing, works really well for me. When you count your breath, take in a breath very slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4. On the count of 10. You hold it and then just release on the count of 10. And, imagine like an ocean wave coming in, coming out. There are all kinds of tricks like that work. And I know they work because I have a home blood pressure thing, one of those drugstore things. But I've done it. I have actually brought my blood pressure down doing that exercise. But Joyce, you were saying about Bach Rescue Remedy helped you when your husband was very ill. Yeah, it's so Joyce, you know what I'm talking about. It's perfectly harmless, and it's amazing. It's world famous. And if anything, I feel like I'm doing a public service here recommending it because almost everybody I know is stressed out right now. People I talk to on the phone across the country are stressed out right now for obvious reasons. Things going on with the stock market and so forth. So I've even thought, do I have some rescue remedy in my medicine cabinet? If not, I need to stock up on it. Let's see. Andy, no, Andy, I didn't see the name of the movie you saw. I'd have to scroll back here. Do I like Jason Statham movies? Honestly, I'm really, I don't have an opinion on one way or the other. I haven't really watched much of what he's done. Uh, Hardly look like a debonair movie man. Well, thank you. Thank you very, very much. Yes, Joyce, back to your drive to Iowa. You took Donnie in the car with you. You sedated her. Yeah, I think it's the most humane thing to do. But rescue remedy can be given to pets. Oh, Wendy, thank you. Please hit the like button. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes, Andy, you said hello. What was that? And sorry, I've never seen any of his movies. Because I did answer your question, Andy. I was just saying I don't really have an opinion about him one way or the other. I haven't really watched much of his stuff. Let's see here. What was this, Andy? If it was the Three Stooges, I would say pick two and poke that like button. you know, um, it was the movie called The Working Man. Yeah, I have to confess I'm not familiar with that film. Maybe you could tell me a little something about it. Um, oh yeah, no, Andy, you brought up a point here about Joyce. Speaking of Iowa, did you know Cary Grant died there? I knew that he died in Davenport, Iowa. It was toward the end of his life. He was doing a number of stars used to do these, like Betty Davis, Lana Turner, Joan Crawford, where they would go on tour to cities around the country and, where they'd show some clips from their films on a screen, and then the star would come out and they would just take questions from the audience. And that's what Cary Grant was doing, taking questions from the audience in Davenport, Iowa. And he became ill that evening. I forget what he died of. I think it was a heart attack, but I could be wrong on that. And, Davenport, Iowa always had a place in my heart because I don't know if you've ever heard of a company called Black Hawk Films. It's long gone. It got decimated by home video and streaming, and but in the day they used to sell old movies like Laurel and Hardy, Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton on Super 8 millimeter film, which was what back in the day when we had home movies. It was Super 8 film, before there was even videotape. And we'd have home movie projectors, Super 8. So it was a way to have movies in your home, old films. And when I was a kid, I used to save up my allowance money. And almost every cent of my allowance went to Black Hawk Films so I could get a new film for my projector. Anyway, how about Jay Norris passing Gail Gordon and Mary Wickstrom on that show with him? Yes, that is very true. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but Jay North did a guest appearance on the Lucy show. So he worked with Gail Gordon and Lucy. It was the one where Jay North was paying this really bratty, spoiled rich kid. And she was hired to pretend that she was a robot. They had her dressed up like a tin soldier with little red cheeks and the hat and everything, and she had to march and take orders from him. You can probably find it on YouTube. But Jay North, I had a friend who knew him, and it was not a happy childhood. It wasn't a happy childhood for the majority of those children who were on TV shows. They were worked very, very hard, long hours, and sometimes 6 days a week, which was illegal, but it went on anyway. And this whole thing about, yes, they were required by law to have a tutor on the set, and they were supposed to get 3 hours of schooling in between shooting scenes. Well, most of those child stars, including Jay North, will say that was like a worthless education. They got nothing out of that. So they were not really prepared for the real world. Once their television show was over, they had been typecast to the point where they couldn't get hired in much of anything else, and they had to go back to real life and real schools and so forth. A friend of mine knew Erin Murphy, who was one of the twins who played Tabitha on Bewitched. And he was telling me, he went to high school with her, and he said it was a little difficult for her making the adjustment, having been on a Hollywood TV show on a soundstage for all those years. And now she was having to try to fit in. And a lot of those child stars will say when they went back to school, real school, they were bullied very badly. Other kids would really take it out on them. And my friend said he would never forget the day Erin was at her school locker. Somebody sneaked up behind her and dumped a whole bucket of water over her head. He said he'd never forget that. She was so upset about it. But Jane North told my friend it was well, I think he's also talked about this publicly. I'm sure there are lots of stories coming up on the internet about Jay North. You'll see a lot in the coming week, like People Magazine stuff. They'll do stories about him. But no, it was not a happy childhood. They worked him very hard. And he said, I think one time he had worked 6 days a week. And on his seventh day, they had to bleach his hair to play Dennis the Menace. He said on the seventh day, he had to get his roots touched up. They had to bleach his hair. And he said all that peroxide just burned his scalp. And it was so painful to the point he wanted to cry. Yeah. So he went on to become, I believe, a big advocate for children working in movies and television. And he worked to increase rights of child actors. Anyway, but yeah, I've heard those stories from others, like people, we certainly know a lot of tragedy, like the little girl who played Buffy on Family Affairs. She died of a drug overdose. She wasn't prepared to go back to real world. School. I'm trying to think of others. Johnny Whitaker. I've met him. I haven't, not to know him. I just met him, but I heard he had a rough upbringing, and it was hard for him to adjust to the real world. When I say the real world, I mean, quote unquote, outside of Hollywood and television. Lots of times these children are given a false sense of reality because they're coddled and they're sheltered and they're protected. And they're also treated as commodities because people make money off of them. And then suddenly, once it's all over, okay, we squeezed you dry of everything we could get out of you. And it's hard enough on adult actors. With children, it can be quite traumatic. I think I've mentioned this on another show about Lauren Chapin, Father Knows Best. I may have told this very recently. Her parents put all of her money in a trust fund, all the money she made on the show. And I think the condition was when she turned 18, she could have her money, she could access it. Well, keep in mind, a lot of these child stars just had no sense of reality and how to function. She went, cashed it all out, all her money, and took a bunch of friends and went to Vegas. And according to her, went through all the money in one weekend, one wild, decadent weekend. What a tragedy. What a tragedy. I better get back to my comments here. Let's see. What was this? This menace. Yeah, he may be giving Mr. Wilson a hard time in heaven. Yeah. Gail Gordon was a wonderful, wonderful comedic actor. Just wonderful. In fact, it was Dennis the Menace. That was the reason he was not on the Lucy show from the very beginning. He came on the second season after he was available, just like on I Love Lucy. He was the original choice. He was Lucy's choice anyway to play Fred Mertz. She very much wanted him, but he was committed to working with Eve Arden on Our Miss Brooks, just like B. Benaderet was her choice to be Ethel Mertz, and B. Benaderet was very much committed to the Burns and Allen show. And of course, B. Benaderet went on to star on Petticoat Junction. Let's see here. It needs to be said that the performer who played Margaret on that show would stay his bestie to the end. I saw that. I saw some really nice pictures of them when they were grown up. You could see the affection between them. But yeah, he was 73 and he died of colon cancer. Um, but it's really nice, all the lovely things that are being said about him. And clearly the show was loved. And if I'm not mistaken, the woman who played his mother, I think she lived, I think, to be 100 or at least well into her 90s. And she didn't die that long ago. Let's see. Let me check some of the comments here. Goddess Val. Hi, Burt Reynolds did that. And he mentioned he was inspired by Cary Grant. Yeah, I can see that. Oh, Cary Grant inspired us just scores of actors. I mean, he was like a benchmark, you know, so brilliant, so irreplaceable. Oh, an evening with Burt Reynolds. I would imagine that would have been fun to have seen him. He certainly had his share of stories. And, at one time, he was the number one box office draw in the movies for like 5 years in the late 70s to early 80s. And then it just all evaporated. It all went away. And he started having health problems. He had serious back issues. I think that escalated into addictions to prescription drugs. He great highs, great lows. So I would imagine when he did a one-man show talking about his life, taking questions, I'm sure he had some amazing stories to tell. I was really surprised when he died and I saw the pictures of him near the end of his life. And he was a very frail old man at the end. I mean, like hunched over, cane, looked very sickly. And it was just such a shock because that's the antithesis of how you think of Burt Reynolds. But he was, I think, 82 or 83 when he died. And he's buried at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, which is about 15 minutes from where I live. That's where Judy Garland's grave is. I've done some video pieces from there. And he has a beautiful tombstone. It's got a carved bust of him incorporated into the tombstone. It's really beautiful, very tasteful, and I think very worthy of a great star. Just like Judy Garland's grave is like that, and beautifully designed. They did a Wizard of Oz motif for her, and I've told the story of how she was interred in just outside of New York City. I forget the name of the county. I think it's the same mausoleum where Joan Crawford is interred. Judy Garland was there, but the children, Liza, Lorna, and Joey, never wanted her there, but her husband, Mickey Deans, was the one who made the decision. He had the right to say where she was going to be interred. But what was it, maybe 7 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, Liza, Lorna, and Joey, they knew their mother wanted to be buried here. Her life was here, Hollywood. So they made some wonderful arrangement with Hollywood Forever Cemetery, and they built a mausoleum just for her. It's called the Garland Pavilion. And there are some spaces in there. I'm sure they're very, very, very expensive if you want to be interred next to Judy. But Judy is there, lovely grave, wall crypt, I should say, and gates that look like the gates to the Emerald City. And let's see what else I was going to say. Yes, there are spaces supposedly for Liza, Lorna, and Joey when their times come. And there are a few people interred in there. Anyway, that's enough of that about cemeteries. What are some other comments here? What's this here? We don't know that friends their whole lives. Yeah, Paul Peterson. Yeah, he was another one. I think he mentioned of some trials and tribulations being a child star. Um, I'm sorry, I lost my place here. When I'm scrolling through these things, it moves, and then I have to get back to where I was here. Let's say I need a little place marker here. Oh, but Andy, you made a comment here. Bucket of water over a TV daughter of a witch. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Maybe they were going to see if she would melt being a witch, but that is awful. My friend said it was very humiliating. Very humiliating. It was a really mean thing to do, but I was just pointing out how a lot of former child stars, when they try to adapt to going to regular schools, the kids can be really, really brutal and cruel. Um, I went through some bullying myself as a child. A lot of us did. And I was once talking to the great Shakti Gawain, the spiritual writer who wrote the best-selling book, Creative Visualization. I was lucky enough to go to her home. She lived in Tiburon, California, across San Francisco Bay. And we were discussing that. And she said a lot of people don't realize child abuse can come from other children, and it can be just as traumatic as coming from an adult. And I thought, that was just interesting when she said that to me, and it made me think about myself and a lot of other people. Let's see here. Oh yeah, Kathy, that's true about the tragedy, about Buffy's character. I was mentioning, of course, about the actress who played her, Anissa Jones, and she died of a drug overdose when she was only 16 years old. And I was reading that Brian Keith, her co-star from Family Affair, he was doing a new TV show at the time. This was like around 1974. So Family Affair went off in 71, I think. He was doing a new TV show. It didn't last too long. But anyway, he was a very caring man. He cared deeply about those kids. And he offered her a role on the show. He said, look, we will write a character just for you, because he thought maybe that would help save her. He knew she was in trouble, and of course she declined it. She said she had no desire to ever go back to show business. And, it was last fall. I had lunch with Kathy Garver, who played Sissy on the show. Now, I did not ask a lot. I felt it was inappropriate to ask questions like this. We were having a nice lunch with a mutual friend, but she was very gracious to talk about Family Affair. And she mentioned that little Anissa Jones, Buffy, they had to bleach her hair. It was really hard for her, and it was damaged her hair. And those little curled pigtails, sometimes they had to put false pigtails on her because her hair was so damaged from all the bleaching. And that's also true, by the way. The little actress who played Cindy on the Brady Bunch, they had to do the same thing. They had to bleach her hair, and her hair was falling out. And she told us in an interview, I think it was Sherwood Schwartz, the producer, said, "Oh, we'll just put false pigtails on her like they do on Family Affair." And she was like, "No, you won't." She stood up for herself. But yeah, it's a sad fate. And here we go. Somebody's waking up here. Here is Miss Sasha. She's going, leave me alone. Leave me alone. I don't want to be on the camera right now. But she's my beloved little Siamese. She had a 10th birthday last week. She's still looking pretty good. I've had her since she was 10 weeks old. But I lost track now. I was talking about the child stars and Kathy Garver talking to me. Oh, yeah. One of the things she did say to me, she reiterated what a lovely, lovely, thoughtful man Brian Keith was. Very, very caring. And she said he was a former Marine, just macho and tough as could be, that, like a man's man. But she said he was so vulnerable and tender at the same time. And that was the appeal, because he brought all that to the Uncle Bill character. I think that's why people loved him so much. It was that, those two polarities that he managed to merge into one. But it was really fascinating to sit with Kathy. I mean, I grew up with that show. So here I am, being all dignified and everything. I've mentioned before, I know celebrity etiquette. I know how to behave myself and not gush. But inside was my little 6-year-old self going, I'm sitting with Sissy from Family Affairs. But I didn't say anything like that. Um, but she's someone who adjusted quite well. And of course, she was a teenager on the show, and she lives a wonderful life now. She still does. I see her pop up on TV commercials. She told me she does audiobooks. I believe she's working on a one-woman show. She keeps working, keeps working. She keeps putting herself out there, and she also makes herself accessible to the fans. She does a lot of these autograph signing events across the country. She loves to be in touch with the people. And then she even encourages people to befriend her on Facebook. I'm giving all kinds of plugs today. Let's see here. Kathy, you're asking, did Lauren work again after she lost her money? Not much. Not much at all. That was the problem with that's the problem with a lot of television actors in general. They get typecast, and they hit it very big for a while, and then they find themselves washed up has-beens. And unfortunately, that's the fate of a lot of those child actors. A lot of them were not lucky to work again. And then I think in her case, she also got heavily into drugs, alcohol. It's a sad story. I read for time she was a prostitute. She was even using that fact that she had been little kitten. They called her Kitten on Father Knows Best, and that's how she was selling herself. It's a sad, sad story. But she got her act together. I know they did in the 70s. They did a couple of Father Knows Best reunion movies for television, and she, of course, acted on those. I'd have to look up IMDb to see if she's done much of anything else, but I don't think so. I think the main thing she does now is like what I was saying about Kathy Garver. She travels the country doing these meet and greet autograph shows, which have become very popular in the last few years, and talk with fans, pose for pictures, sign things, for a fee, of course. I've gone to a few of those shows myself, and not so much lately. In fact, I haven't been one in many years, but I used to go to them in the 80s and 90s. They were kind of fun. It was kind of a novelty then. Let's see here. Oh, it was George. She was one of Kitty Georgie's girls' offspring. Georgia was a long hair. Lynx Point Siamese from the late 70s, I believe. She was a rag doll. And of course, you have a Lynx Point right now, don't you, Joyce? Your little baby. I know you love very much. Oh, yes, Ward, thank you. Gloria Henry played Mrs. Mitchell, lived to be 98. I was incorrect, and I said she lived to be 100, but it's close. She had a much smoother life than Dennis Ketchum's tragic mother, who died a few months before the show. I didn't know that. I don't know a whole lot about the real life Dennis. The Hank, I think it was Hank Ketchum, who was the cartoonist who did the strip, and it was based on his own little boy. But I think I read that little boy grew up and got into a lot of trouble and so forth. But I can't really comment on it because I'm not familiar. But I recall reading that somewhere. And I didn't know that about his mother dying early too. Oh, how sad! How sad! I mean, especially sad when you look at all the joy and happiness people have gotten from that comic strip and from that TV show, but yet there's the underlying tragedy to that. Kathy, you miss me doing videos? Yeah, I do too. I need to do them. I know. It's just I have been working so hard on my freelance art and a few other projects, and I've got one right now that's huge that I'm not at liberty to discuss for legal reasons, but it's big. It's if it comes true. I'm doing the sketches for it right now, and it's for someone who's famous for what he does, but I have to be very respectful and quiet. Maybe in a few months I can talk about it. But those videos, it takes a lot of work to do those. If you've seen those, where many times I would go on location. That's where I'm very lucky here in Los Angeles. I have a plethora of locations to go to, old Hollywood sites. There's still a lot standing. Like whenever I wanted to do a piece on Lucille Ball or I Love Lucy, I could always go down to the actual soundstage and stand outside in front of it. I could go to Lucy's first home that she and her family moved to in 1934 on North Ogden Drive in West Hollywood. It still stands. And I was once inside that house. I once was able to make arrangements with the owners of the time, and she graciously gave me a top to bottom tour of the house and the backyard and everything. So I've been there. But I would do this for a lot of my videos. But even the ones that I would do here in the living room, like much like I'm doing now, where I just sit and talk, you still got to set up all your lights and everything. You've got to shoot it, and then you've got to edit it, and then you've got to post it. And it was consuming me. It was taking sometimes several hours a day just to do that. And it was at the expense of my other work. So I will do more videos. Thankfully, I have a big catalog. Oh my God, there are hundreds on there. So I do have enough, but there has not been a new video, I'm embarrassed to say, in a year, because I have been so diversified in other things. But I always made a point of keeping this show going, this live stream every Monday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. So I figure it at least keeps my presence on YouTube. It keeps I don't even check to see what the algorithms are or anything. I'm sure they're not so great for me right now, but at least it keeps my presence on here. It serves as a marker. It keeps me in touch with all of you. You can be in touch with me. And I do enjoy doing it. This isn't so cumbersome to do. The videos require preparation. A lot of these topics, I will admit, I know well enough that I can talk off the top of my head without a script like I do here. But I try to make them a little more formal, a little more structured. So they're, a little scripting in that respect and so forth. And I just, it's just too time consuming. But this is kind of fun, because I don't prepare. I don't. I just, as you've seen many a time, I just get on here as close to 5 o'clock as I can. I have this one light here, get in front of the laptop and just log on and hope for the best. I just kind of free fall into it. And it's a kind of exhilarating for me because, this used to be the sort of thing that would scare me to death. I used to have stage fright about it, anxiety. I'd obsess about it all day long. Oh my God, what if I get on camera and I mess up or I embarrass myself? Well, I just got over all that. And it's been pointed out to me by other people who do YouTube. It doesn't have to be necessarily polished or professional. What goes over on YouTube is just us being ourselves and getting on here. And if we make a mistake, we laugh about it, and move on, acknowledge it or whatever. So that's been a big step in my personal growth to work like this, to just go on live like this and sit and talk. And like last week, I didn't plan to be on here for 2 hours, but I did. I was on for 2 hours, but there was just so much to talk about. You guys were giving me comments and questions, and we were just having a little party here. I don't intend to stay on that long today. I can't, but it's just about being in the flow, and that's a very exhilarating place to be. And I think sometimes that's where the magic is. When we don't obsess so much about something, we don't overthink. Like sometimes I even apply those principles to my artwork. It's like improvisation. It's like jazz music. You just let the energy flow through you and let it take you wherever it's going to take you. And sometimes I'm like, wow, I wouldn't have done that from my conscious mind. Let's see, what are some other comments here? Um, Klimberg, the drummer from Blondie, also died this week. Oh, I didn't know that. I tell you, a lot of those music groups from the 80s, in our consciousness, we still think of them as young, and a lot of them have gotten older now, and a lot of them are dying off. A lot of music stars from the 80s, as we know. Um, I'm reminded of when I went to the Hollywood Bowl once, and it was the B-52s. Remember them? The B-52s with the beehive hairdos and everything. Punk rock, early 80s. I went to the Hollywood Bowl to see them, and here were these, dare I say it this way, these old people in their 70s. I say that like, yeah, I'm not old, right? But these people in their 70s up on stage playing 80s punk rock. It just like, there was an incongruity to it. It felt so weird to see that. Um, let's see here. Yeah, Ward, yeah, Kathy Garver did a commercial for a video phone with text for hard of hearing folks. I see that commercial appear almost every day. Every day. She's a lovely, lovely person. Warm, sweet. She will, if you ever have the luck of being in with her in person, she will graciously talk about family affair. She'll just answer any questions you have. Some people eschew these things. Like, was it last week we were talking about Tina Louise and Gilligan's Island, and I told about how I had met her, and I got the definite vibe: do not bring up either of the G words. Gilligan or Ginger, do not bring it up. Do not talk about it. And she will state this in interviews. She's grateful for the fans and the love, blah, 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 but she doesn't want to discuss it. See, Tina Louise always wanted to be a dramatic actress, so she's always blamed Gilligan's Island for destroying that. I don't think that's the case. But anyway, that's Miss Louise. But people like Kathy Garver are the exact opposite. They know that's what they're famous for. They know that's what the fans are interested in, and they know it's been a blessing to their life, and they treat it as such. Dawn Wells, when I met her, who played Marianne, was like that. She just embraced, I was Marianne. That was the biggest thing I ever did in my whole career. Did a lot of other stuff, but people want to talk about Marianne, so be it. I mentioned how I met Natalie Schaefer, played Mrs. Howell. She was a love. Spent 30 minutes with me when I ran into her in a drugstore in Beverly Hills talking about Mrs. Howell and Gilligan's Island. And I will cherish that the rest of my life. And I find, people are always asking me about celebrities like this. I find a lot of them are very mindful of this sort of thing. They know that when a fan approaches them, they meet a fan, that fan is going to remember this, possibly for the rest of their life. So they feel the responsibility to be polite, be nice, be gracious, and give that person a memory, a really lovely memory. And I've countered that a lot. Let's see. Andy, why are they called has-beens? I don't know how that term got coined, but that's often a reference to people who once had a big career on television or something, and then they're not working anymore. No one will hire them. Their career's basically over, and then somewhere along the line, that term got coined. Ward, yes, I do agree. That's utterly sick. They do that to Misshapen. There's no question about that. It's her life. Much of her life was a huge, huge tragedy. You can certainly look it up online if you want to read more about it, rather than me talking about it. But I think she's done a good job of healing and recovering. And she seems to be in a much better place now. I have friends who have met her at some of these signings where she and Paul Peterson and Eleanor Donahue, the three of them, they're all, I believe, in their 80s now, but they still make appearances. And my friend got his picture taken with the three of them behind him and all. And they know to embrace. Father knows best. What's Joyce, Maya looks a little like Sasha. Yeah. Of course, you're looking at the back of her right now. But yeah, Sasha, of course, is a seal point Siamese. I told you I once had a lynx point. But she was my favorite cat I ever had in my whole life. She lived to be almost 19 years old. And that cat and I went through a lot together. I had her from the time I had just graduated college a few months earlier. So I had her from the time I had just gotten out of college. She moved across the country with me to California, and I had her all the way to the year 2001. And I just sometimes I think that's one of the cruel tricks of nature, that we fall so deeply in love with a pet to where they almost become like a child to us, but we only get a few years with them. My cat before Sasha, I had a Siamese. He only lived to be 14. He had bladder cancer, and I tried very, very hard to save his life. I spent a fortune on vet bills. I was coming home from work, putting cat food in the blender and pureeing it and putting it in a syringe, and I was force feeding him, and it was his time. And he was 2 months before he died. He was telling me, let me go. It's okay. It's okay. When I was trying to shove all that food down his throat and everything, he was miserable. He just wanted to be left alone. But people I've talked to, friends who have their pets and love them, we sometimes are in agreement. We do it more for ourselves than we do it for them. I wasn't ready to let him go. And then I was devastated when he died. It's hard. But it was said to me once that the best way you can honor the memory of a previous pet, take all that love for them that you're still holding in your heart, and you give it to the next pet. And you're truly honoring the previous pet, because that's what they would want you to do. They really would. And I believe that with all my heart. Uh, let's see, where's some other comments here. Check. Did you ever see Walter and Emily? No. Brian Keith and Cloris Leachman. I know what you're talking about. I remember when that show was on the air. I just never watched it. And I'm sorry I didn't. Two wonderful performers. Now, Cloris Leachman, I've told my stories how I have met her like 8 or 9 times. It was almost absurd how we kept running into each other. And one time I saw Cloris Leachman on stage in Westwood Village, California, the Geffen Theater. And it was a one-woman show about the life of Grandma Moses called Joyride. Still remember the title. And it was in 2 acts. First act, Cloris Leachman played Grandma Moses as a 45-year-old woman, before she was famous. She was just taking painting as a hobby or whatever. I'm trying to remember. It's been so many years since I've seen the play. But there was a 20-minute intermission. And during that intermission, Cloris was backstage being made up, because the second act, she walks out as elderly Grandma Moses, white hair pulled back in a bun and everything. And oh my God, the audience was so charmed. It was such a beautiful performance. I don't know. I'm wondering if Walter and Emily, there's an episode on YouTube or something. I'd be curious to check that out, since I never saw it. And I bet they were marvelous together. Bet they were. This is moving. It moves for I can read it. The Rome is my favorite song by the B-52s. One of the best classic travelogue vids. I'm trying to remember. I think they performed that. Oh yeah, Ward, like Allison Angram. That's a good example of an actor embracing their television past. Nellie Olson. She's been basically, like you said, it's true. She's been Nellie Olson for the last 50 years. She did try her hand at stand-up comedy at one time, and she had this opening line, "Hi, you may know me as the Prairie Bitch." I think that was her line. But yeah, she does a lot of these autograph shows and events and things, and she makes herself accessible. And Joyce, thank you. I was saying earlier, I don't know how long I'm keeping this. I just didn't have time today to trim it like I need to, and I was worried about messing it up. And I was also thinking, Well, maybe it's going to come off altogether. It may be off by the time I do Whimsy Show tomorrow. I haven't decided yet. Um, yeah, Joyce, Little House on the Prairie. Um, yeah, that was a show I didn't watch so much. I remember when it was on. I remember how big it was. I just never watched it. My show was The Waltons. I adored The Waltons, and I've told about how I in latter years I got to be friends with Ellen Corby, who played Grandma Walton. She was my neighbor. So, uh, whenever I watch The Waltons, because they've got all the seasons on Amazon Prime right now, it's very easy to find. Um, I have double mixed emotions. One is nostalgia for the television show itself, which I loved so much as a kid, but also I see Ellen Corby on there. She's such a good actress. Oh, such a sweet lady in real life, but a wonderful actress. She won 3 Emmy Awards for Best Supporting Actress Emmy Awards for Grandma Walton. And people sometimes dismiss the Waltons as being like that's like some sugary family show or something. No, watch it. It was beautifully written, and had exquisitely good acting. Well, I mean, the child actors on there, they left a little to be desired, but like Michael Learned, she won 3 Emmys also, and Richard Thomas got an Emmy, Will Geer, just impeccable acting, writing. And when I watch that show, and the show's over 50 years old now, it holds up beautifully. Highly recommend it. Let's see. What are some other things here? Surprising Mr. Keith and Miss Leachman had fantastic chemistry. Well, I was just mentioning that because even though I didn't see it, I know those 2 actors. I can imagine them having fantastic chemistry. As though they were a real life older married couple. Yeah, it was refreshing to ever play someone more likable than Phyllis. That was the big problem with Phyllis. When it came time to spin off the character from Mary Tyler Moore's show, it was because Rhoda was a major hit when they spun her character off. It almost became bigger for a while than the Mary Tyler Moore show. So they had the bright idea of spinning off another character. And at the time, Cloris Leachman was red hot. She had just won an Oscar like 2 years before. She had won Emmys for playing Phyllis on the Mary Tyler Moore show. So it seemed like a logical spinoff. Let's put the great Cloris Leachman in her own show. The problem was Phyllis was a thoroughly unlikable character. She was never meant to be anything more than a supporting player on the show. And she wasn't even on all the Mary Tyler Moore shows. That's why if you look at the closing credits, it said special guest star Cloris Leachman. Cloris Leachman had a clause in her contract that allowed her to work on other projects. So she did a lot of made-for-TV movies during the early 70s, theatrical. She had her Oscar. So she didn't have time to be on the Mary Tyler Moore show all the time. So Phyllis was almost like an afterthought, an occasional character. So characters like that you can take in small doses. But when you make them the center of their own show, it's another story. So they had a big dilemma. They had this character that basically turned people off. And then the writers realized, well, if we start making her more likable and more accessible, she's not Phyllis anymore. So consequently, the show did well for a few months, and then the ratings started sliding. And then the second season, it flopped badly and got canceled. So that's what happened there. So yeah, I'm sure. And Cloris Leachman was such a diverse actress. So I'm glad she got to play things other than Phyllis. And I really hope there are some episodes on YouTube. And you've got me curious now. I'd like to check it out. But knowing what good actors those 2 were and playing an older married couple, I'm sure as great actors, they created a back history for the characters. They probably did a lot of improvisation together. They got to know each other personally. That's what really good actors tend to do when they're going to play opposite each other that way. I understand the actors on the Waltons became very, very close in real life. In fact, Ellen Corby told me, and yes, Ellen Corby had the stroke and she had difficulty talking, but it was her partner, Stella, who used to help communicate for her. And Ellen told me that the Waltons cast, and this was back in the early to mid 90s, the Waltons cast, like 20, 25 years later, was still very close. They were like a real life family. She said that they were always getting together for dinner. They'd go to events together. They'd attend funerals. They'd attend weddings, christenings. They were like a real family, but they brought that to the show, with it's those unspoken things that make actors great when it's just present. It's in their souls, it's in their eyes, it's the chemistry, the way they relate. So I would imagine Brian Keith and Cloris Leachman took the time to do that, and that's why they were so good together. Let's see here. Oh, Arlene, thank you for your comment. My feline is beautiful. Yeah, I love my Sasha. She's very special. One of the things, let's see, where you were mentioning one of the things that helped the Phyllis show was having Phyllis's step mother. Yes, Mother Dexter, the wonderful Judith Lowry. She was incredible. And the way that started, it was a one-time appearance, but she made such an impression. And this was when the show was starting to get into trouble in the ratings, and the writers were just looking for anything to retool the show, to reformulate it, to give it some new life. So they quickly made her a regular on the show. It was a marvelous move, but unfortunately, Judith Lowry died. She died not long after being cast on the show. She was very, very elderly. That was incorporated into her character. She played a mean, cranky old lady, which I understand she was not like that in real life. Very, very sweet woman in real life, but she played that character. It was much like Estelle Getty playing Sophia on The Golden Girls. Though, I do realize Estelle Getty in real life was not an elderly woman. They made her up to look elderly. The reality was, B. Arthur was only 1 year older than her, but she just was so good at playing that elderly woman. But nonetheless, a very cantankerous old woman who spoke her mind. And of course, that was the premise of The Golden Girls, that Sophia had had a stroke that destroyed the part of her brain that censored what she had to say. Mother Dexter, they never explained it that in such detail. She just was kind of like that, where she just say whatever she felt. Oh yeah, she was good. I need to watch those episodes again too. Um, oh, let's see. Cloris made a TV movie called "Someone I Touched" about venereal disease. Was that by chance like a movie made, like one of those after school specials for children? Where they help to teach life lessons and things, educate, like things like venereal disease and so forth. That sounds like that, because if I'm not mistaken, Cloris won 9 Emmys, that I know. I think one of her Emmys was a daytime Emmy, and it was for doing a daytime movie. So maybe that's what it was. Oh yeah, Young Frankenstein. And yeah, that's probably next to Phyllis what Cloris Leachman will always be remembered for. Though I always loved her as Nurse Diesel. Remember High Anxiety, the other Mel Brooks film she was in? God, she and Harvey Korman were so funny together. Yeah, no, I was just saying that about Judith Lowry dying before the end of the second season. In fact, several people on that show died. I think Cloris Leachman was asked once by Larry King, well, why did Phyllis not last longer than it did? And Cloris said, well, everyone was dying on me. And of course, there were a whole bunch of problems with that. What was this word? Miss Corby was so lucky to have had the Waltons cast for family, since she had outlived her entire real life family. That's true. That is true. She had her life partner, Stella, and I'm not giving any secrets away here. This is an openly known fact that Ellen Corby was in a gay relationship with her partner, Stella, but they were beautiful together. Beautiful. Stella I can tell you personally, Stella took such good, loving care of Ellen. I'm glad they had each other. Let's see. Here were some other comments. Oh, or my favorite on the show is Mr. French, Sebastian Cabot. Yes, he was such a good actor. Now, he was someone who also wrestled with the dilemma of being typecast as Mr. French. Um, he said in latter years when the show was still running, he could not wait for the show to be over. He said that he wanted to sink his teeth into some really good dramatic roles. And he said what he really wanted to do was play a villain, a menacing villain, which he kind of did on the Twilight Zone. There's a wonderful episode there, but he said he was just so craving to get away from Mr. French. Um, but Kathy certainly spoke very well of him. And Kathy once did a comedic video. I forget, it was something online during the pandemic where she was playing the character of Sissy in present day. And she was saying how Mr. French was now 103 years old and he still came over to make her lunch every day. I remember that part. I forget where you can find that video, but it was really cute. And I mentioned that to Kathy, and she had a good laugh about it and said she loved gently parroting her image and her famous show. But yeah, the one with Sebastian Cabot on the Twilight Zone. I love that one. I love that one where I haven't seen it in years, but this man thinks he's died and gone to heaven. And Sebastian Cabot was playing a character a little bit like a manservant butler type who was just granting him everything he wanted, every wish, everything he wanted. And finally, the man started to get bored. Life was getting dull when there were no problems anymore. Everything was just perfect and easy. And he says to Mr. French, to Sebastian Cabot, he says, you know something, I don't think I want to be in heaven anymore. I think maybe I want to go the other place. Heaven, I'm not cut out for heaven. And Sebastian Cabot just rather wickedly starts laughing and goes, heaven? You think you went to heaven? Like that, and then it fades out. Yes, he had gone to hell, and Sebastian Cabot apparently was the devil. I got to look for that again. I'm sure I've misquoted it terribly. Anybody who has watched the episode recently, because the Twilight Zone, you can find those quite easily. I want to look that episode up. Oh, so the VD movie was for prime time. I was just wondering because it sounded like after school special, because Cloris got an Emmy for one of those. Yeah, Mel Brooks singing the theme song. Yeah, High Anxiety. That's a funny movie. Madeline Kahn. The whole thing is a parody of Hitchcock. So Madeline Kahn was playing the icy blonde, the Grace Kelly, Kim Novak, Tippi Hedren composite character. And I think Cloris Leachman's Nurse Diesel was based on Judith Evans' character in Rebecca. I think that's maybe where that came from. Yeah, or the worst about Phyllis, the worst story was Barbara Colby, who played Phyllis's boss. She was on the first 3 episodes of Phyllis, and she was murdered. And I understand it was a drive-by shooting. As I understand the story, she was going to an acting class with a friend. A lot of actors, even though you're working on a show, you still hone your craft, like the ballet dancer going to the bar, like Baryshnikov doing that. So she was coming out of an acting class. I forget where it was, but somebody drove by firing a gun and she was shot. And she was Ethel Merman's daughter-in-law. Ethel Merman's daughter-in-law. I remember that. And the reason she got cast on Phyllis was because she had done a couple of Mary Tyler Moore shows and made a big impression. I think one of those was the one where Mary Richards had to go to jail for not disclosing her news source. And Barbara Colby was playing this very tough prostitute in the jail cell with her. And here's innocent little Mary, but it was really cute. And they had wonderful chemistry together. And then they brought her back for another episode. Barbara's character was now out of jail and coming to Mary, I guess, to get a job or something. And Mary was trying to help her, and they were not having much luck. And then Barbara Colby decided she wanted to be a dress designer. You know the episode? And she comes with this big gift box and says, Mary, I have this gown I made for you as to show you my appreciation. And Mary's like, oh, that's so sweet. You made me a gown. She goes off in the other room, changes. And I swear it was one of the biggest laughs they ever got on the show when Mary walks out in this very, well, first of all, it was hideously tacky, but it was also very revealing. It looked like some bad dress from Fredericks of Hollywood or something, where you could see the bra and the panties and it was all exposed. It was very, very out of character for Mary Richards, and got a huge laugh from the audience. But anyway, Barbara Colby was very much embraced by the MTM people, and she was the first choice, to play Cloris Leachman's boss. And they felt she would be a good contrast. Much as she was a contrast for Mary, she'd be a good contrast for the Phyllis character. And then, of course, she was sadly murdered. And Cloris Leachman recorded a tribute to her that was going to air at the beginning of the show. It was like a 1 or 2 minute tribute honoring her. And CBS wouldn't let her. They said, no, this is too much of a downer. You can't have this before a comedy. And I understand Cloris was very upset about that. Anyway, that's what I know about Barbara Colby. And her murder has never been solved. I think it's still an open case. Didn't Cabot do the voice of Owl? I know Sebastian Cabot did. I know he did a voice in the Jungle Book, the original animated Jungle Book. I'm trying to remember what his character was. Was it a panther? I'm not sure. He was in that, and he may very well have done some other voices. I don't know, honestly, but he had as we know, he had an exquisitely beautiful voice. And, one of the subjects, Sebastian Cabot, and I think this is on YouTube, he, in 1973, I think it was like a couple years after Family Affair ended, he did a remake of Miracle on 47th Street, the Edwin Gwynn role of Santa Claus. Edwin Gwynn, of course, won an Oscar for it. And it's just an amazing performance where the whole movie, you're like, is he Santa Claus? Is he a fake? Is he Santa Claus? They purposely kept it ambiguous. But I remember Maureen O'Hara was talking about it. She said Edwin Gwynn was so invested into that character, he stayed in character. He just was Santa Claus, to where even the actors, the real life actors, were like, is he really Santa? He got them believing. So yes, he got the Oscar for it. That's how good he was. But anyway, Sebastian Cabot did a remake, and in my opinion, matched the performance. He was every bit as good. Look for it on YouTube. And I do remember one little bit of trivia. He had, ironically, to play Santa Claus, he had to shave off his beard, his celebrated beard, because he had to have those white Santa whiskers. And there was just, well, first of all, there was no way to bleach his beard like that, his real beard, and they couldn't put the beard on top. So he had to be clean shaven to put on the whiskers. And he said it was traumatic for him. He had had that beard for like 20 years. He loved it. He took care of it. It was his image. And it broke his heart to have to shave it off, but there just was no choice. He wanted to play that role, and he rightfully knew it was a great role. And of course, a number of years later, it was oh my gosh, why am I blanking his name? Richardson, Sir Richardson. Richard Attenborough. Richard Attenborough. Sorry, not Richardson. Richard Attenborough. They did a theatrical remake, and he begged to play that role. He campaigned very hard, and he got it because he knew how great that was. I think he was thinking maybe he was going to get an Oscar for it, but he didn't, and wasn't successful. Yes, that's it. Yeah, and the dialogue, heaven. Whatever gave you the idea you were in heaven, Mr. Valentine? This is the other place. That laugh he did. Oh, yes, yes, the tiger Shere Khan. That's who he was in the Jungle Book. Yeah. But no, it was Miracle on 47th Street. And I have to be careful not to say 42nd Street. That's another movie. Let's see. That looks like most of the comments there, and we're at the hour and a half point here, almost precisely. So I'm probably going to sign out now, unless anybody has another question or anything before I go. A remaining comment. But otherwise, I don't want to wear out my welcome here, and I'm just so grateful to every single one of you for being loyal to me and coming through for this show each week and giving me an audience. And believe me, you give me a lot of material. I just bounce off of you. I play off of you. You give me topics, you give me questions, and something is filed away in my brain that I can talk about. Where did I get the neat Los Angeles pillow? That was a Christmas present from a friend a few years ago. He gave it to me, and I'm not sure where he got it from, but I've always loved it. I have to be very careful with it because of my cat. Because, this is all, sorry, everything's reversed. This is all embroidered, and Sasha with her claws. So sometimes, unfortunately, I have to flip it around when she's being a little rambunctious, or cover it up if I'm going to be away. I don't like doing that, but I don't want to lose the pillow. Let's see. And we're in stories about Lucy in the Colorado River and the Grand Canyon. And here's Lucy. I'd have to think on that. I know they had a lot of problems. The water being very cold. Lucy had to wear a wetsuit under her clothes. And and it was a little dangerous for Lucy because she did a lot of her own stunts. Like, there's a scene where she's in her sleeping bag, like I think on an inflatable mattress, if I recall, and the water starts rising, the waves start coming in, and she slowly gets washed out, and she wakes up in the middle of the Colorado River. Help! Help! And and the kids have to get in the boat, and Uncle Harry and save her and all. And she had to do a lot of that for real. And that's where Irma Cusley, Lucy's hairdresser, it was Irma who told me she had to have a whole standby of wigs on stands, sometimes 3, 4, and 5 wigs, because when Lucy would do stunts like that, like we were talking earlier about the Thames River, Lucy in London, and her hair would get wet or messed up, there was no time for Lucy to go get her hair done again, when they had to do more takes and things. So they would just take one wig off and put another wig on. So I'm sure Irma Cusley had her arsenal of wigs with her that day, because that was, Lucy in those days, she had those big teased up bouffant hairdos. But anyway, I maybe I can think of some other stories. That's all I can think of right offhand. Let's see here. Hey, can we talk about next time, since he passed away recently, Richard Chamberlain? Oh, yeah. Well, actually, I told all my Richard Chamberlain stories I had last week, but yeah, we can bring it up again next week, certainly. Let's see, what was this? When I first saw that episode, I just thought that Lucy used a lot, yes, in capital letters, a lot of hairspray. I'm sure that's the case. Irma was more than just a hairdresser. She was like a bona fide sculptor and carpenter. Those hairdos took a lot of work. In fact, I suspect one of the reasons Lucy had to wear wigs, it was just not possible to do that to actual human hair without destroying it. In fact, a lot of those, in the 60s, those bouffant hairdos were very, very popular. And now when I watch a lot of movies and TV shows, I can tell the women are wearing wigs. It's not their real hair. And I even spoke to a friend who is a hairdresser, and she said to me, "Oh, that's impossible to do all that to your hair. You just can't do it." So anyway, yes, Andy, your mom loved the Thornbirds. I was talking about that last week, and Barbara Stanwyck, and you may recall I mentioned about my friend Bart, who was a literary agent, and there was this nutcase who had written this tell-all book about Richard Chamberlain. It was all fictitious, and Bart warned Richard Chamberlain, and Richard Chamberlain wrote back to thank him and say, "Yes, I'm very aware of this." And this is quoting Richard Chamberlain, though that literary loony. My people have been dealing with her for quite some time, but I'm very appreciative of you warning me about her. And that was pretty much all I knew about Richard Chamberlain. But more stuff. If people want to contribute, please, we can talk about it next week. Lisa Loring died. Yeah, a lot of those child stars. She had a challenging life. Joyce. Yeah. Oh my gosh, Joyce, watch the Thornbirds. It's on home video. It might be streaming somewhere. It might be on YouTube. I loved it. I loved Barbara Stanwyck. That was like, it wasn't her very last acting role, but it was like her next to last. But it was her last great, great, great role. She won an Emmy for it. And maybe she should have ended right there, go out on top. But she was so good. And that scene where she seduces Richard Chamberlain was a priest, a young, attractive priest. And Barbara Stanwyck was a woman in her 70s who still had a lot of fire under, the snow on the roof and the fire in the furnace thing. And she had a hot and heavy crush on the priest. And there's this scene where she tries to seduce him. And I think it's the scene that got Barbara Stanwyck her Emmy, where she says, "Oh, I know I'll burn in hell for this, and I don't care." Remember that is only Barbara Stanwyck could deliver a line like that. And I recall she also said, "Oh, I will get you back for this, priest. I will get you for this. You may not go to hell, but you'll go through hell here on earth," or something to that effect. I don't know. Anyway, check out the Thornbirds. It's worth it. Yeah, a lot of stars in their stepping years, still in their 90s, and some still working. It's really incredible. People are living longer. It's like Shirley MacLaine. She's like 90 or 91 now, 92. And I saw a little interview with her. She said, "You know what? I'm just going to keep working till I drop dead on the film set." And she was serious. I worked till I just drop dead. Yeah. But anyway, just add a hat, keep the stash a bit. Okay, Arlene. Well, anyway, I've got to go. It's been about an hour and a half now, and I've got to meet with a friend in a little bit, and then I've got to work on this project I'm working on. But I just want to thank you very much, and be here same time, same place next week, and catch me tomorrow on the Oracle of Whimsy channel with the wonderful Dr. Whimsy Anderson and her show Taco Tuesdays, which is 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And of course, that's a very different show. That's where we get into politics and news events, and a lot to cover tomorrow. Hers is the show I have to really do my homework for, be prepared, because this show is very freeform, obviously, but her show, it's very embarrassing if I'm a deer in the headlights. I don't know what I'm talking about, so I have to be prepared beforehand. So thank you all. Oh, Joyce, thank you. Thank you, Andy and Ward and Arlene. And oh my gosh, Kathy was here. I forget what else. I can't scroll back. It's not letting me, but I just thank you all very much, and I'm grateful to you. So I'll see you next week. Bye for now.